Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's DinaKalmeta here. And for today's news, I wanted to bring you guys a quick update concerning some headlines that have occurred in the last few days. We're going to talk about how over in Europe, the United Kingdom is actually looking to build their own Iron Dome in order to protect themselves from Russia. And in Germany, they hired engineers to build trenches on Poland's border. And over in Asia, Japan has broken their 70-year taboo and are openly discussing nuclear weapons. And as for China, well, it's being reported that they're doing some dogfighting in space. And it doesn't end there. Russia has warned President Trump that he hopes he doesn't make a fatal mistake with Venezuela. And of course, we cannot leave out Israel. It's being reported that 6 nations have quietly joined President Trump's Board of Peace. Let's start close to home. Things are beginning to get explosive. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven crude oil reserves. Even in its current state, it produces around 900,000 barrels per day. But here's the key. Nearly 76% of that oil goes to China. This is why the tension is beginning to skyrocket. President Trump has ordered what is being described as a total and complete blockade of sanctioned oil tankers. But now we need to understand the legal gravity of this. A 1961 U.S. Department of Justice memo explicitly states that under international law, a blockade is traditionally considered an act of war. So there were questions. Was it an act of war against President Maduro's government? Well, according to Bloomberg, for the time being, the answer appeared to be that the president was just skirting the edge of such a distinction by focusing on one type of vessel, but not all of them. That makes it a quarantine, which is legally distinct from a full blockade. The Venezuelan regime has appealed to the UN, calling this an evil blockade designed to starve their people. And Nicolas Maduro has gone even further, publicly calling for the Colombian army to join forces with Venezuela, declaring that we must unite so no one dares touch our sovereignty. The superpowers are moving pieces on the board. China immediately condemned the U.S. for bullying, but Russia issued the darkest warning. Moscow explicitly stated that they hope the U.S. does not make a fatal mistake in Venezuela. And Russia's foreign ministry has begun evacuating the families of diplomats from Venezuela. The evacuations, which started last Friday, include women and children and come as Russian officials assess the situation in Venezuela in what the intelligence source described as very grim tones. And over the weekend, there were some very alarming new developments. On Saturday, U.S. forces seized another Venezuelan oil tanker. The Venezuelans accused the United States of committing a serious act of piracy. And on Sunday, it was being reported that U.S. forces were pursuing yet another oil tanker. And now Venezuela has ordered its Navy to escort its tankers carrying petroleum products from its ports after President Trump declared a complete and total blockade on sanctioned tankers going into and out of Venezuela. Something else to keep in mind, approximately 40% of the oil that Cuba imports comes from Venezuela. And we are being told that if that oil is cut off, the Cuban economy could collapse. Now, while the Americas is heating up, Europe is physically preparing for World War III. Let's look at Finland. This is a nation that knows Russia better than anyone. Barron's reports that Finland has just announced they are raising the reservist age to 65. They are literally preparing to call up grandfathers to fight. This move will add roughly 125,000 reservists to their strength, and you don't do that unless you believe an invasion is a genuine possibility. Meanwhile, the UK is panicking about its skies. The Daily Mail reveals that Britain's Armed Forces chief is now planning a UK Iron Dome, a massive missile shield specifically designed to protect the UK from a Russian attack. And they are admitting their current defenses are not enough. And on the ground, the East Shield project continues. Germany and Poland are digging trenches and laying dragon's teeth tank traps along the border. And they aren't just digging in. They are planning to move out. Reports confirm that 26 European nations are organizing a multinational force for Ukraine. This force, headquartered near Paris, is designed to enter Ukraine after any ceasefire to train and support a standing Ukrainian army of 800,000 troops. Moscow views this as a de facto NATO occupation on their border. After the British Prime Minister made comments about Russian aggression, Putin started flinging insults. But with insults, they're cheap. Missiles are not. According to Express News, Putin has deployed hypersonic missiles within minutes of striking distance of major European capitals, warning of an unprecedented escalation. Zelensky himself is warning that Russia is preparing to make next year a year of war. And how is Europe paying for this? When their plan to seize Russian foreign assets unraveled legally, EU leaders didn't blink. They approved a massive $90 billion loan to Ukraine. So without a doubt, tensions are very, very high in Europe, with Ukraine, with Russia. But let's take this moment to switch gears and talk about what's happening in the Middle East, most specifically Israel. First, it's being reported that Israel has launched intense airstrikes in Lebanon as the deadline to disarm Hezbollah looms. But the bigger story is Iran. Iran International reports that a former Israeli diplomat has confirmed that Israel is weighing regime change in Iran. And NBC News confirms that Prime Minister Netanyahu plans to brief President Trump on possible new strikes on Iran. But here is the thing. While Israel prepares to strike, their enemies are regrouping. Prophecy Newswatch just released a report titled Back to Square One. It details how Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are using this quiet time to rebuild their tunnels and restock their arsenals. Prophecy Newswatch is also reporting that something unusual is forming in the Middle East. Quietly, deliberately, and with unmistakable international weight, a coalition of nations has agreed, at least in principle, to sit on what is being called the Board of Peace. Its stated purpose is straightforward, as I reported to you before, to oversee the post-war management of Gaza and guide the region from a fragile ceasefire towards something resembling stability. But history tells us that when global powers assemble around Jerusalem and its surrounding territories, the story is never merely administrative. At present, several key nations are understood to have committed to this board, including Egypt, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Germany. This participation does not guarantee funding, troops, or long-term enforcement, but it does signal international buy-in. Symbolism matters in diplomacy. So does President. The goal now is expansion. Additional seats are being quietly pursued, with Saudi Arabia at the top of the list. Then there is Turkey. Bringing Turkey into any peace structure presents an entirely different challenge. Turkey's president has repeatedly issued inflammatory rhetoric towards Israel, language that goes well beyond diplomatic protest. At various points, he has spoken of marching on Gaza, mobilizing his own army, and framing the conflict in explicitly religious and civilizational terms. But here's where the conversation becomes far more serious and far more revealing. While public attention remains fixed on the high-profile Board of Peace, real authority is quietly shifting elsewhere. A mid-level executive body is being assembled to manage the day-to-day realities of governance, security coordination, reconstruction, and political transition. This group will not make headlines, and it will not hold grand summits, but it will shape outcome. Israel is transferring its defense headquarters from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is not just an office move. This is Israel declaring to the world that Jerusalem is the sovereign, undivided capital and the military heart of the Jewish state. Simultaneously, alliances are hardening. Israel, Greece, and Cyprus are forming a joint rapid reaction force, roughly 2,500 troops with naval support, in order to protect gas fields and undersea cables from sabotage. So let's pause and think about Zechariah chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. God says, "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about." Israel moving its military headquarters to Jerusalem is a direct fulfillment of the city becoming the center of global tension. And look at Turkey in Ezekiel 38. They are flipping between Russia and NATO, trying to find their place. The Bible tells us that they will eventually align against Israel, as I mentioned last week, and we are watching the nations shuffle into their prophetic positions right now. There is no denying that Europe is in preparation mode right now. And the United States, well, she's headed for a direct collision with Russia if cooler heads do not prevail. And this whole board of peace business, that is a recipe for Daniel 9:27, but not quite yet. The Antichrist hasn't been revealed, and he's the one that's going to confirm that covenant with Israel, with many others. And it also has to be for 7 years. So we're still missing some pieces to that puzzle. But look at what's happening with Japan. A nation committed to peace for decades is now openly discussing nuclear weapons.
For 70 years, Japan has been a pacifist nation. But the Japan Times reports that a senior government official had said the quiet part out loud. Japan should possess nuclear weapons. They see the threat from China and North Korea. No longer trust the U.S. shield to save them. Meanwhile, the U.S. poured gasoline on the fire with its largest ever weapons package for Taiwan. $11.1 billion in precision fires and drones. China, in the meantime, is absolutely furious and have demanded that the U.S. stop arming Taiwan. A spokesman for the State Council Taiwan Affairs said that Washington's decision undermines China's sovereignty and security interests and sends a wrong signal to Taiwan independent separatist forces, calling the authorization of the massive arms sale a blatant interference in China's internal affairs, stating the following: "We firmly oppose and strongly condemn this, demanding that the U.S. immediately stop arming Taiwan and cease supporting Taiwan's independent separatist forces." The United States Space Force General has confirmed that China is practicing satellite dogfighting. He described an event where 5 Chinese satellites were maneuvering around each other in orbit, in scrutiny, and in control. They are practicing how to grapple, tow, and destroy our GPS and communication satellites. The general listed the satellite dogfighting demonstration alongside several other concerning activities from near-peer U.S. adversaries. That includes Russia's 2019 demonstration of a nesting doll capability, where one satellite released a smaller spacecraft that then performed several stalking maneuvers near a U.S. satellite. These behaviors indicate the space capability gap between the U.S. military and its closest enemies is shrinking. In the meantime, China has probably loaded more than 100 of its nuclear-armed, solid-fueled DF-31 intercontinental ballistic missiles into 3 silo fields near its border with Mongolia, according to a new draft Pentagon report. The draft report, which could still change, also assesses that China does not want to have talks on arms control, as Reuters reported, as it's hoped for by President Trump, who is pushing for denuclearization with Beijing as well as Russia and North Korea. But President Trump has just recently accused China of conducting secret nuclear tests and threatened that the U.S. would resume its own. Beijing denied Trump's accusation and said it upholds its international obligations on non-proliferation.
These headlines are not random, but they do echo exactly what we've been warned to look for. We're told in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that there would be wars and rumors of wars. Nation would rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. We're told in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3 that Jerusalem would become a burdensome stone. We're told in the book of Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 that a coalition would form against Israel. And then, of course, there's Daniel 9:27, and that framework is being laid out right now. So definitely prophecy coming to pass, or right on the cusp of coming to pass. But I'd love to hear from you guys, so please do leave your comments below. With that said, those are your headlines for today. There will not be a show on Wednesday or Thursday due to the holiday, but I do hope you guys have a very Merry Christmas. Until next time, God bless and stay safe.